everyone, and welcome back to my channel, and welcome if you are new here, and welcome to all my new subscribers who subscribed to me during the holiday break. And I know I did say at the end of last year that I wasn't sure if I was going to take a break or not, but when Christmas week sort of finally came and everything was happening, I felt really burnt out. So I decided that that was really my body's way of saying you've had a heck of a year and you do need a break. So that's why I haven't done any videos over the holiday break. I just really needed a little time to myself and just to spend time with my family and do some fun stuff over the holidays. But now it's back to work. And I'd also like to start this video off by saying Happy New Year, everybody. I hope you all had a really wonderful holiday season. And my break that I took was lovely and quiet, and that's just how I like it. So it was good to have a little bit of downtime, but as I was saying before, the break is over now, and it's time to get back to exploring the darker side of humanity with a new real crime down under. And this was a subscriber requested case, so a shout out to my lovely friend Sarah, who suggested today's case. So thank you so much for this case, Sarah. But before I shine a light on a very dark piece of Australia's true crime history, I ask you to please consider subscribing to the channel if you've not done so already. It helps me out a ton with the algorithm, as does leaving a comment or two and a thumbs up if you enjoyed today's case. And also, subscribing is for free and it helps me out more than you know. Now, before we begin, I need to give a trigger warning for distressing content. And also, if you were planning a snack to go along with today's helping of homemade horror, I'd advise against it as this case does involve attempted human consumption, and that is the nicest way I can subtly put it as the reason to not eat. So, just so you know, you've been advised. Now, that's all out of the way. Let's delve into today's case. And today's case is the case of Katherine Knight, and as I call her, the Butcher of Aberdeen. And as the case progresses, you'll understand why she was given this name. And the Aberdeen that I'm talking about in this video is actually a town in the Hunter region of New South Wales, not to be confused with Aberdeen, Scotland. Katherine Knight was born and raised in an unconventional and dysfunctional family environment. Her mother, Barbara Ruffin, née Thorley, had been married to Jack Ruffin and lived with him in the small town of Aberdeen in New South Wales in the Hunter Valley. They had 4 sons before Barbara began an adulterous relationship with Ken Knight, who was actually a friend and co-worker of her then husband. Local backlash forced Barbara and Ken to move to Moree. None of her sons moved with her. The 2 eldest boys continued to reside with their father, and the 2 younger sons were sent to be raised by an aunt in Sydney. Barbara had 4 additional children with Ken, including twin girls born in 1955 in Tenterfield. Katherine was one of these twin daughters, and they were non-identical twins, in case you guys were wondering. In 1959, when Knight was 4, Jack Ruffin died, and his 2 elder sons, who had been living with him, moved in with Barbara and Ken. Ken was said to be a violent alcoholic who would essay Barbara up to 10 times per day. Barbara, however, was no angel herself. In turn, she often told her daughters intimate details of her sex life and how much she hated sex with men. Later, when Katherine complained to her mother that one of her partners wanted her to take part in a sex act she did not want to perform, Barbara would go the opposite direction and tell her daughter to put up with it and stop complaining. Katherine claims she was frequently essayed by several members of her family, though not by her father, which continued until she was aged 11. Although there are doubts about the details, the psychiatrists did accept her claims, and the events had been largely substantiated by other members of the family. So, okay, this brings me to a question, and I was questioning this while I was doing the research. If people knew that Katherine was being abused in this way, why didn't anybody do anything about it? Like, I know it was back in the late 50s, early 60s. Why did somebody not do something for this child? And I couldn't find anywhere whether her twin sister was also getting the same treatment, but it just seems a little strange to me. If this child was being treated like this, why didn't anybody speak up for her? Why didn't anybody go to the police? Why, or at least try and get her away from this situation? So we are starting to see why Katherine Knight became the person she became. It also turned out that her mother, Barbara's great-grandmother, was an Indigenous Australian from the Moree area, and she had married an Irishman. Barbara was very proud of this fact, and she did identify as Indigenous. This was, however, kept a family secret, as there was considerable racism in the area at this time. And Barbara's descent was a source of tension for her children. Apart from her twin sister, the only person to whom Katherine was even a little close to was her uncle Oscar Knight, and he was a champion horseman. But it didn't last for long. Katherine was devastated when her uncle took his own life in 1969, though she does continue to maintain that his ghost pays visits to her. After this, the family moved back to Aberdeen. When she attended Musselbrook High School, Katherine became a loner and was remembered by classmates as a bully who would stand over smaller children. She assaulted at least one boy at school with a weapon and was once injured by a teacher herself, who had subsequently fought in an act of self-defence against Katherine. By contrast, when not in a rage, Knight was often referred to as a model student and often earned awards for good behaviour, funnily enough. However, upon leaving school at age 15, she still had not learned to read or write very well. But she did gain employment as a cutter in a clothing factory. 12 months later, she left to start what she referred to as her dream job, cutting up offal at the local abattoir. And working at the abattoir as well was her father, Ken Knight. So she was going to work with her dad, and she actually really enjoyed her job. And I think she also wanted to impress her father by doing well at her job. But as the case progresses, we're going to see that Katherine kind of started to like this job just a little bit too much. So there she was quickly promoted to boning and was given her own set of butcher's knives. At home, the knives were hung over Katherine's bed. As Knight said, they would always be handy if I needed them. And this was a habit she continued until her incarceration everywhere she lived. So we move on to Katherine's first marriage. So Katherine was married to a man named David Kellett. And Katherine Knight first met co-worker David Stanford Kellett in 1973. Kellett engaged in heavy drinking, which stemmed from two traumatic incidents from his previous railway job in Coffs Harbour. First, when his best friend was killed in front of him in a shunting accident, and later when he rescued injured occupants of a school bus in Kempsey, which had been struck by a train, killing 6 children. He eventually lost the job due to deteriorating behaviour and performance, but he soon got work at the nearby Aberdeen abattoir and became close friends with Knight's brother. Often if Kellett got into a fight, Knight would step in and back him up with her fists. In Aberdeen, she was well known for physically threatening anyone who upset her. Knight married Kellett in 1974 at her request, with the couple arriving at the service on a motorcycle, with a very intoxicated Kellett on the pillion. As soon as they arrived, Knight's mother Barbara gave Kellett some advice, and this is chilling. The old girl, Knight's mother, said to me, "Watch out. You better watch this one or she will effing kill you. Stir her up the wrong way or do the wrong thing and you're effed. Don't ever think of playing up on her," which meant cheating on her. "She will kill you." And that was her mother talking. David Kellett would also say, "She told me she's got something loose. She's got a screw loose somewhere." And then on their wedding night, Knight tried to strangle Kellett. She later explained it was because he fell asleep after only having consummated their marriage a meagre 3 times. So apparently Katherine wanted more. Her husband was drunk, he was exhausted. And because she couldn't get what she wanted from him, she proceeded to try and strangle him. So that is a very lovely way to begin a new life and a new marriage. However, they did stay married for a little while. The marriage proved to be particularly violent, and on one occasion a heavily pregnant Knight burned all of Kellett's clothing and shoes before hitting him across the back of the head with a frying pan, simply because he had arrived home late from a darts competition after reaching the finals. And the reason that Katherine did assault her husband when he came home is because he was late, and she had talked herself into thinking that he was with another woman, that he was cheating on her. And it was just as her mother had tried to warn him, if Katherine ever thought that was going to happen, she would try to take his life. In fear for his life, Kellett fled before collapsing in a neighbour's house and was treated for a severely fractured skull. Police wanted to charge Knight, but she changed her behaviour to ingratiating Kellett and talked him into dropping the charges. I would actually love to know what she said to him. She's waited for him to come home. She's whacked him as hard as she could across the back of the head with a fry pan. And then she just nicely talks him out of pressing charges against her. It's just, it beggars belief. I would just love to know what she actually said. In May of 1976, shortly after the birth of their first child, Melissa Ann, Kellett did leave Knight for another woman, and he moved to Queensland. He was unable to cope with Knight's constant abuse. And, oh my God, these are the parts of the cases, and if you know me, you know that these are upsetting parts of the cases, anything to do with children, so I'm going to give you a warning here. Nothing bad actually ended up happening, but it was her intention of what she thought might happen that gets me here. And there is a young baby involved, so if you're sensitive to that, maybe just skip this part and move forward probably 5-6 minutes if you don't want to hear this part. But I promise the baby was okay. So I'm just going to say that before I get to this part. If you want to watch it, do. If you don't, just shunt it along probably 5 minutes. The next day after he left her, Katherine was seen pushing her new baby in a pram down the main street. She was violently throwing the pram from side to side. She was admitted to St Elmo's Hospital in Tamworth, where she was diagnosed with postnatal depression and spent several weeks recovering. After being released, and this is where the really bad part comes, Knight placed her 2-month-old baby daughter, Melissa, on a railway line shortly before a train was due. She then stole an axe and proceeded to go into town and threatened to kill several people. Fortunately for baby Melissa, an unsheltered man known in the district as Old Ted, who was foraging near the railway line, actually saw the baby laying on the tracks. He rescued Melissa, by all accounts, only minutes before the train passed. Knight was arrested again and taken to St Elmo's Hospital, but apparently she recovered and signed herself out the following day. A few days later, Knight slashed the face of a woman with one of her knives and demanded she drive her to Queensland to find Kellett. The woman escaped after they stopped at a service station. However, by the time police arrived, Knight had taken a young boy hostage and was threatening him with a knife. She was then disarmed when the police attacked her with brooms and was admitted then to Morisset Psychiatric Hospital. Knight told the nurses she had intended to kill the mechanic at the service station because he had repaired Kellett's car, which had then allowed him to leave and then kill both her husband and his mother when she arrived in Queensland. And I'd say she probably would have killed whoever Kellett had gone off with as well. When the police informed Kellett of the incident, he left his girlfriend and moved to Aberdeen with his mother to support Knight. And this is another part of the case I just don't understand. Like, she told the police that she was planning on ending the lives of Kellett and his mother and probably anybody else who got in her way. She's violently attacked innocent people on her descent into madness, trying to get back at Kellett. But then he comes back to be with her. I don't understand this at all. Like, we could get into narcissistic personalities and the sway they have over their victims, but he was gone. He was away from her. So why would you come back to that? If it was me, I would have been gone. I would have been in hiding. I would have left the planet. I'd be living on Mars by now. It's just, no. So Knight was released on the 9th of August 1976 into the care of her mother-in-law, wow, along with Kellett, and moved to Ipswich, a city west of Brisbane. And she obtained another job at an abattoir, the Dinmore Meatworks. On the 6th of March 1980, they had another daughter, Natasha Marie. In 1984, Knight left Kellett and moved first to his parents' house in Aberdeen, then to a rented house in nearby Muswellbrook. Although she returned to work at the abattoir, she injured her back the following year and went on to a disability pension. Since she no longer needed to rent accommodation close to work, the government gave her a housing commission residence in Aberdeen. And from here we move into the other relationships that Katherine Knight embarked on after, I guess, she decided that she was finished with Kellett. Oh, this whole case is just so weird. Like, she's so abusive. She is an absolute nightmare. She's unstable. She's capable of anything. She openly threatens these people. She admits to the police what she had planned, and yet they still go back to her. So that tells me maybe she was quite charismatic. Maybe she could turn on the charm and be very sweet when she needed to be. And by all accounts, she, on first glance, and this sort of came through on one of the podcasts I listened to get ready for this case, that she, on first glance, you have to remember, like, back to the late 70s, early 80s, when the women were really soft and they had all that, like, the soft hair and the soft looks, and that was what sort of drew people to Katherine. Like, she had this lovely smile. She looked very soft, very motherly, very feminine. But there was all this darkness underneath the persona that she put out. So she did have a few relationships in her time before she was convicted. 1986, Katherine meets 38-year-old miner David Saunders. A few months later, he moves in with her and her daughters, although he kept his old apartment in Scone. Katherine soon became jealous regarding what he did when she was not around and would often throw him out. He would move back to his apartment, where she would invariably follow and beg him to return. And I have to give a trigger warning for this next part, as it involves a rather distressing incident with the puppy. I'm going to leave it in because you have to know this part, because it speaks very loudly to her character. If you don't want to hear it, again, please fast forward probably about 5 minutes if you don't want to hear this part. And if you don't want to hear this part, I don't blame you. It upsets me, but I'm going to keep it in and I'm going to explain it as softly as I can. In May of 1987, how do I say this? So Saunders had a dingo pup. And I can't say what she actually did to it, but she did away with the dog in front of him. I'm not going to say what she did. It's no. So she did away with the puppy for no more than a reason, as an example of what would ever happen to him if he had an affair or he left her. And she did this before proceeding to going on to knocking him unconscious with a frying pan. In June of 1988, she gave birth to a third daughter, Sarah, which prompted Saunders to put a deposit on a house. Knight paid off the deposit when her workers' compensation came through in 1989. Knight decorated the house throughout with... Oh my gosh, I forgot about this part. Oh, this is... Oh, giving me Texas Chainsaw Massacre vibes. Okay, like many of you know, I'm a Wiccan. I'm a good witch. I'm a white witch. I don't practice anything nasty or satanic, but we do kind of like skulls and things. And I find skulls, like if you... Skulls like found objects. If you find like a cattle skull or a horse skull, you're out walking about and it's cool and stuff, and it's, you know, it's just out somewhere and you are allowed to bring it home, and you might want to like clean it up, as I have done with a few that were gifted to me, and make them into a piece of boho art or something beautiful out of a skull. That's fine, because you're making it into something pretty. But this, oh no. And it's making me wonder where the hell I suppose she got them from the abattoir. But total Chainsaw Massacre vibes. Oh my god. So Knight proceeded to decorate the house throughout with animal skins, skulls, horns, rusty animal traps, leather jackets, old boots, machetes, rakes and pitchforks. No space, including the ceilings, was left uncovered. And I mean, okay, I'm a horror girl. I'm a horror girl from way back. I love scary movies. I love scary stories. But holy crap, that is actually horrifying. Like, can you imagine, say you're somebody that's got to come over her house and come into the house. I don't know, maybe like a cop or somebody. And you come in and you see all this, now that would be, even for a police officer, I think would be completely disturbing. But can you imagine, look, old Millie from next door comes over. It's like, oh, hey, I just want to borrow a cup of sugar. Oh, sure, come on in, I'll get it for you. And you walk in and there's skulls and weapons and, oh my God. I love scary stuff, but that's would even be too much for me in real life. That's like, ugh, no. So, as inevitably always happens, she had an argument with Saunders, and she hit Saunders in the face with an iron before stabbing him in the abdomen with a pair of scissors. He then moved back to Scone, but he later returned home to Aberdeen. And when he returned home, he found that she had cut up all of his clothes. Saunders took a long service leave and went into hiding. Knight tried to find him, but no one admitted to knowing his whereabouts. Several months later, Saunders returned to see his daughter and found that Knight had gone to the police and unjustly told them that she was afraid of him, and they actually issued her with an apprehended violence order against him, which is also known as an AVO here in Australia, or a restraining order if you're from the States. So, after all of this horror was visited upon Saunders, Katherine found herself another beau. In 1991, Knight became pregnant by 43-year-old former abattoir co-worker John Chillingworth and gave birth the following year to a little boy they named Eric. Their relationship lasted 3 years before she left him for a man which she had been having an affair with for some time, John Price. This is leading up to the tragic events of today's case. So, John Charles Thomas Price was born on the 4th of April 1955. He was the father of 3 children when Katherine Knight began an affair with him. He was reputedly a terrific bloke and was liked by everybody who knew him. His own marriage had ended in 1988. While his 2-year-old daughter had remained with his former wife, the 2 older children lived with him. Price was well aware of Knight's violent reputation as she moved into his house in 1995. His children actually liked Katherine. He was making a lot of money working in the local mines, and apart from a few violent arguments at first, life was pretty good in the beginning, but it always is with Katherine in the beginning. In 1998, Knight and Price fought over his refusal to marry her. In retaliation, she videotaped items he had allegedly stolen from his work and sent the tape to his boss. And although the items were just old things that were just laying around and were going to be thrown out, like old out-of-date medical kits that he had scavenged from the company rubbish tip, Price was fired from the job that he had held for 17 years. The same day as all this happened, he kicked her out, and she returned to her own home while news of what she had done had spread throughout the town, allegedly. A few months later, Price restarted the relationship, although he now refused to allow her to move in with him. The fighting became even more frequent, and most of his friends would no longer have anything to do with him while they remained together. So he gets back together with Katherine, and the behaviour just escalates and gets worse and worse. In February of 2000, a series of assaults on Price culminated with Knight stabbing him in the chest. Finally fed up, he kicked her out of his house again. On the 28th of February, he stopped at Scone Magistrates Court on his way to work and took out another AVO in an attempt to keep her away from both himself and his children. So, also, after losing his job at the mines, he did get another job, and I think he was actually working at the abattoir at the time. So, that afternoon, Price went to work, and he told his co-workers that if he didn't come to work the next day, it was because Knight had murdered him. Despite their pleas that Price should not return home, he stated that he was afraid Knight would kill his children if he did not. Price arrived home to find that Knight, although not there herself, had sent the children away for a sleepover at a friend's house. He then spent the evening with his neighbours before returning home and going to bed at 11 p.m. Earlier that day, Knight had brought new black lingerie and had videotaped all her children while making comments which have seemed to be interpreted as a crude sort of a will. She later arrived at Price's house while he was sleeping and sat watching television for a few minutes before going to have a shower. She then woke up Price and they had relations, after which he fell asleep. At 6 a.m. the next day, a neighbour became concerned when he noticed Price's car was still in the driveway. When he did not arrive at work, his employer sent a worker to see what was wrong. Both the neighbour and the worker tried knocking on Price's bedroom window to wake him up. There was no answer. They then alerted the police after noticing blood on the front door. So, when I was listening to the podcast, there was actual testimony from the police officers that attended the scene, and it was an horrific day for them indeed. The younger of the 2 police officers would go on to say that he was looking through one of the windows or the back door, whatever it was, and they could see something was hanging in one of the doorways. And at first they thought that it was a curtain or an old blanket that had been hung up there, but we're going to find out soon what it actually was. And we're getting into horrific details of the case now, so I just want to warn everybody again, it gets pretty rough. It's as rough as it can be, so just prepare yourself. So after breaking down the back door, police find Price's body, and they find Katherine Knight comatose from taking a large number of pills. She had stabbed Price with a butcher's knife a total of 37 times while he was sleeping. According to the blood evidence, he woke and tried to turn the light on before attempting to escape, while Knight chased him through the house. He did manage to open the front door and get outside, but he either stumbled back inside or was dragged back into the hallway, where he finally died after bleeding out. Later, Knight went into Aberdeen and withdrew $1,000 from Price's account at an ATM. Price's autopsy revealed that he had been stabbed, as we said, at least 37 times, in both the front and back of his body, with many wounds extending into vital organs. Several hours after Price had died, now this is where it gets really icky, so just prepare yourself, Knight had skinned him and hung the skin from a meat hook on the architrave of a door to the lounge room. And this is what the younger of the two police officers who attended the scene had seen while he was looking through the window on the back door. And when they went inside the house to see what was going on in there, and there was a lot of blood evidence, and as they walked up and the younger of the police officer went to slide this curtain aside, when he touched it, he realised his hand was wet, and when he looked at it, his hand was covered in blood. And he has looked up and he has seen what he described as a pelt hanging from the hook in the doorway. She had skinned John Price, and his skin was hanging from this hook. So you can imagine, for a young police officer, that is an absolutely horrific find. It would be a horrific find for any police officer, but for a young cop who was unseasoned in homicide, it was pretty horrific for this cop that had actually found this. So then we move on to the next horrific part of this case. She had then decapitated Price and cooked several parts of his body, serving them up with meat, baked potato, carrot, pumpkin, beetroot, zucchini, cabbage, yellow squash and gravy in two settings at the dining table, along with notes placed beside each plate. Oh my gosh. And this is, ugh. This is awful, because can you imagine if his children had come home? The notes had his children's names on them on each plate. She had cut sections from Price's buttocks, cooked them up with the vegetables to serve to his children for a meal. There was also a third meal that was thrown out on the back lawn for unknown reasons. And, oh, this is so bad. It is speculated that Katherine had attempted to try and consume the meal herself, but she couldn't do it. This has been put forward in support of her claim that she has no memory of the crime. And, oh my God, this just keeps getting worse as it progresses, so please prepare yourselves, guys, and please do not be eating at this part of the case. It's bad. Price's head was then found in a pot of vegetables, and the pot was still warm, estimated to be at between 40 to 50 degrees Celsius, and that's between 104 and 122 degrees Fahrenheit. And these temperatures are important, indicating that the cooking had started taking place sometime in the early morning. Sometime later, Knight had arranged the body with left arm draped over an empty 1.25 litre soft drink bottle with his legs crossed. This was claimed to be an act in court in an act of defilement, demonstrating Knight's contempt for Price. Knight had left a handwritten note on top of a photograph of Price, bloodstained and covered with small pieces of flesh. The note allegedly read, "Time got you back, Jonathan, for..." And I think we can guess what the next word means. She's actually written, "Time got you back, Jonathan, for rapping." And I think we know she means essaying her daughter. Her daughter. There was never any reports of anybody essaying any of her children, so this just goes to show her mental state at this time. You too, Beck, which is Price's daughter, for Ross, for Little John, his son. And it goes on to say, now play with Little John's. I guess we can understand what she probably put next because she's vulgar. The accusations in the note were found to be groundless. So she was in a pretty bad way when she committed this crime mentally. But that's no excuse for what she did. Knight's initial offer to plead guilty to manslaughter was rejected, and she was charged on the 2nd of March 2001 with murdering Price, to which she entered a plea of not guilty. Her trial was initially fixed for the 23rd of July 2001, but it was adjourned due to her counsel's illness, and it was refixed for the 15th of October 2001. When the trial commenced, Justice Barry O'Keefe offered the 60 jury prospects the option of being excused due to the nature of the photographic evidence, which was extremely graphic, and 5 did accept that, and they left. When the witness list was read out to the prospects, several more also dropped out, after which the jury was impanelled. Knight's attorneys then spoke to the judge, who adjourned to the following day. The next morning, Knight changed her plea to guilty, and the jury was dismissed. It was then made public that Justice O'Keefe had been advised of the plea change the day before. He had adjourned the trial and then ordered a psychiatric assessment overnight to determine if Knight understood the consequences of a guilty plea, and if she was in fact fit to make such a plea. Knight's legal team had planned to defend Knight by claiming amnesia and dissociation, a claim supported by most psychiatrists, although they did consider her to actually be sane. 2 psychiatrists concluded that Knight suffered from borderline personality disorder. No reason has ever been given for the guilty plea, and despite giving it, Knight still refused to accept responsibility for her actions. At the sentencing hearing, Knight's lawyers requested that she be excused to avoid hearing some of the facts, but the application was refused. When Timothy Lyons took the stand and described the skinning and decapitation, Knight became hysterical and had to be sedated. On the 8th of November, Justice O'Keefe pointed out the nature of the crime and Knight's lack of remorse, and it required a much severe penalty. He sentenced Katherine to life imprisonment, refused to fix a non-parole period, and ordered that her papers be marked definitely never to be released. This was the first time that this had been imposed on a woman in Australian history. In 2006, in June, Knight appealed the life sentence, claiming that a penalty of life in prison without the possibility of parole was too severe for the killing. I just have to say, oh my God, are you kidding me right now? Justices Peter McClellan, Michael Adams and Megan Latham dismissed the appeal in the New South Wales Court of Criminal Appeal in September of that year, with Justice McClellan writing in his judgment, "This was an appalling crime, almost beyond contemplation in civilised society." And Katherine Knight continues to live out her sentence at Silverwater Women's Prison to this day. And that is where we leave our first case for 2024. I'm sorry that it was such a horrific one to start off with, but it was requested by a dear subscriber, and I did promise that I would do this case for her as my first one for the year. So if you managed to get through this truly, truly horrific story, thank you so much for sticking with me for this one. It was also another hard one for me to get through, considering how many children, animals, and just the absolutely horrific nature of Price's death. Oh, I can't even imagine. I can't even imagine how frightened that poor man must have been while she was attacking him. And God, what a horrible way to go. But fortunately, Katherine Knight is where she cannot hurt anybody else. So thank you all again so much for watching. Please go and watch something funny after this. Something happy. I can highly recommend Real Housewives recaps. Hi Jen, love your work. Or something fun like that, one of Mosaji's fun videos, a funny movie, go have a great time with your children or your pets. And probably wouldn't recommend eating too soon after this case, because, oh God, presenting it has turned my stomach, I have to say. It's, ugh. But I have to give props to Sarah when she asked me if I could do this case. She said, I'm going to give you a trigger warning first. So thank you for that, Sarah, and thank you for suggesting this case. As always, I will be back soon with more Real Crime Down Under, more Real Crime International. We're going to start that this year. I'm really excited about it. More Crime Asia Pacifica. We have our missing persons cases. We have our weird events and strange things that happen in Australia and around the world. And my Scary Stories channel, which I'm still working on. I've got a couple of videos up on there if you want to check it out. It's Tales from Beyond the Veil. And I will soon be coming to you guys from my new podcast studio, which is still being built as we speak, because my husband is building it for me, and he is lovely and fussy, and he really wants to make a good job of it. So it's still happening, and I'm so excited about that. Hopefully I'll be moving in probably by this autumn here in Australia, which is around March, April time. So that's coming up soon. And of course we're going to have more paranormal investigations, which will also be around that time, because it's too hot and snaky to go out on the field at the moment. So we're having a break for summer, and a lot of our members are really outdoorsy people that like to do stuff with their kids. School is still out here in Australia until after Australia Day. So a lot of people are just wanting time with their kids to go beaching or rafting and all that good stuff that you enjoy during the holidays. But we will be back with Clarence Valley Paranormal very soon as well. And we are going to be joined by our lovely friends from Lismore, the Northern Rivers Ghosts and Ghostettes. So stay tuned for all of that. We've got some banger locations coming up. And yeah, just thank you guys so much for sticking with me on my first 12 months on YouTube, as I said before. But I'm so grateful, and I'm just so humbled by the support that I've gotten in my first year. As I said, you guys are amazing, and I love you all so much. So go forth, have yourself a beautiful day after this. Try and forget everything I just told you. Or don't, because, yeah, we do need to remember the victims and remember that these things do happen in life. And please, as I always say, keep yourself safe. If a situation doesn't feel right, leave. Get out of there. Just don't stay around if you're getting those red flags popping up. And yeah, stay safe, everybody. Be happy. And I'll be seeing you all again very soon. Bye for now.